All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Hannah Chow, and I'm a content and SEO specialist here on the web team at Carnegie. I'm so honored to be hosting the final session of our Inside Out conference, and it's going to end with a bang because of our amazing presenter, the amazing Voltaire Santos Moran. Volt is the Executive VP of Creative here at Carnegie. He executes creative processes across print, digital, web, social, you name it. And before Carnegie, he was the co-founder and CEO of M. Stoner, a web development technology agency for more than 20 years. And fun fact, he hired me when I first started out at M. Stoner. So we go way back. He's the one who, like, when we visited Chicago for a company thing, like, he was a great host. So if you ever need recommendations in Chicago, please hit up Voltaire. His colors are pink, red, and purple, and has the coolest persona I've ever seen at Carnegie, which is the compassionate and charming aficionado. Like, that is so cool. And today he's going to be talking to us about the power of story and storytelling, which is absolutely perfect because that's who he is, a storyteller. So, Volt, why don't you take it away?
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you very much. And gotta say, I miss talking with you about Taylor Swift every day. It's one of the things I miss most. But everyone, thank you so much for spending the last part of this workday with us. And I've got to say, I am completely honored and somewhat nervous to be closing out this conference. There were so many amazing speakers who brought their A game. So I will do my best to represent, and I would be remiss if I didn't say huge thank yous to Jory and Steph and Morgan for organizing what has been an absolutely incredible first annual Carnegie Inside Out conference. So thank you very much. All right, let's get into this. So there are four things that I want you all to get out of today's session. The first is I want you to understand why story is so important to us as humans. I want you to know about the 8 purposes that stories play in our individual and collective lives, help you to internalize the 5 aspects of what makes a good story, and finally apply some planning and tools and processes to your storytelling work. So the agenda looks like this. We're going to go in 3 parts. Part 1 is the foundation of story. Part 2 is mobilizing story. And part 3 is lessons learned. And I suppose it wouldn't be a storytelling webinar if I didn't start by giving you a story myself, helping you a little to understand a little bit about my background. And so for that, I'm going to take you back to, I would say, the spring of 1984 to a Gothic-like architecture, Gothic-style architecture, plopped in the middle of downtown Chicago called Quigley Prep. It was my high school, and we had just taken the ACTs. So we were at lunch, and a bunch of us guys were sitting around talking about the future, which is what you do after you've just taken a test that assesses your ability to have one, right? So someone at a certain point asked me, Tony Brandeis, in fact, asked me, Paul, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I thought for a second, and I looked at Tony and I said, you know, Tony, I want to be a writer. And Tony looked at me with absolutely no irony and not skipping a beat. He said, writers are a dime a dozen. And if you decide that you're going to have a career as a writer, you are going to waste your life and you will never make any money. I'm just going to pause there for a second for everyone to have that sink in, and then help you to understand the impact of this statement to me. And to understand the impact, you have to understand the difference between Tony Brandeis and me, okay? So Tony Brandeis was tall, broad-shouldered, incredibly athletic, strawberry blonde with blue eyes. He played all of the sports. And if we had a prom in our all-boys school, which we didn't, he would be elected both king and queen. He was that popular. I, on the other hand, was short, Asian, fat, could not shoot hoop, could not throw a football, did not know the right end of a hockey stick. And the only thing that I had going for me is that I could string a complete sentence together in ways that the rest of my classmates could not. So for Tony Brandeis, who represented all that everyone at Quigley aspired to be, to tell me that the future that I had planned was not a future worth investing in, really shook the foundations of my world. So I sat back, as one must do when confronted by the immovable force that is Tony Brandeis. Then I looked up at his piercing blue eyes and said the only thing that I could say, shit. I need to find a new job. So flash forward some 30 some years. I never had the word writer in my job title. But I will tell you that every day of my professional life, I have written, whether that was an alumni magazine story or a creative brief or a strategy for a client. I have written every single day of my life, and I am very much a writer. And I want to salute all of the writers on my team and across all the teams at Carnegie for the awesome work that you all do. And I want you to think about the fact that none of us at Carnegie have the word storyteller in our title, right? I've seen the org chart. Jory, can I get an amen here? There's no storyteller in the hierarchy, right?
You are correct, sir.
Okay. But every one of us here is a storyteller. And I hope that is the spirit and the curiosity that you bring to this session today. So let's get started. Let's start with the foundation of story. If you are going to read one book on storytelling your entire life, make it this one. Jonathan Gottschall wrote a book called The Storytelling Animal: How Stories Make Us Human. And he says in this that stories teach us fact about the world, they influence our moral logic, and they mark us with fears and hopes and anxieties that alter our behavior and perhaps our personality. So when we think of story, we typically think of, oh, that's really, really fun. It's a great escape. And that is one of 8 purposes that stories fulfill in our lives. And if that was it, that would be enough, right? Stories provide pleasure. They instill satisfaction and joy in our lives. But there are 7 other purposes that stories offer us. The second purpose that stories give us is they help us to solve problems. By hearing or reading about how other people solve problems, we find the strength and insight to solve our own. How many people here have done their MBA or are going into an MBA program of any sort? Hands raised, hands raised. Okay, all right. Seeing a few there. So when I did my MBA, most of what we did was case studies. And what we would do is we would get this HBR, this Harvard Business Review case study, that was a true story about a corporation facing some sort of big decision. And they would ask us, what would you do in this situation? And then after we said what we would do, we would get the punchline of what they did and what happened as a result. And I can tell you, my favorite reminiscence of this was the capstone class that we did at the end of the MBA, and we were looking at international harvester and a new CEO who was facing the resistance of unions for policies that he was putting into place. And to a T, every single one of us in that class said, well, you shouldn't bother unions. Oh, no, 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 you should do this, you should do this. And we found out what happened was he did that and he wrecked the company completely because the unions were stronger than he was. So it's really cool to see how stories can teach us to solve problems or learn lessons from the mistakes that other people have made. The third purpose of story is to assimilate. It helps us to get used to new situations more easily. So I've got a story about this. Last year, I was giving a talk, funny enough, on storytelling in Philadelphia, I think. And I got to my hotel. Hotel had a very serviceable restaurant and bar, so I went down, ordered a glass of wine, ordered my burger and French fries because I was rewarding myself for being on the road. And the guy next to me hit me up with a conversation. I typically don't like to talk with people. I typically put my noise canceling headphones on, which is basically a single signal of I don't really want to talk with you or interact with the world right now. But he wanted to talk anyway. So he asked what I was doing at the hotel, and I said I was speaking at a conference. And he asked what I was speaking on, and I said storytelling. And he said, I just retired as the global head of HR for AT&T. And I've got to tell you that story is one of the main things that we use to help new employees to understand the environment that they are in. So it's really cool to see how stories can help us assimilate to those new situations. Stories impart traditions to us. Stories teach. Stories provide pattern and order, like structure. I should tell this story. So my executive coach once said to me, and this is one of those things that I will remember forever. Volt, in the absence of information, our, our minds will run to the worst possible scenario. Let me say that again. In the absence of information, our minds will run to the worst possible scenario. How many people can quietly admit that that's what they do? Yes, yes. I'm seeing some nervous smiles. Yes, exactly. And that speaks to this, that our minds are looking for pattern and order. And when there are gaps of information, our minds will do what is necessary to put together a coherent narrative that we can anchor to. It's just the way that we are wired. The seventh purpose for story is it allows us to connect, to accept cultural differences, and to understand our similarities. This is huge for us at Carnegie, right? Because we are all about the art of connecting. Human connection is what drives the work that we do. And the final purpose of story is that stories help us define ourselves, not only for other people, but for ourselves. I want you to think for just a second about the things that you remember, the memories that you play back in your mind, because I would tell you that what you continue to weave together as your story of your past or your story of your present or your story of what you want in your future, that is you trying to define yourself and understand yourself better through the story that you tell yourself and the story that you tell others. So there's this great quote from Carmen Gallup. He talks about the fact that a thought triggers the same regions of a brain that would be activated if you were actually experiencing an event in real life. There was a study recently where they hooked theater goers, well, not too recently, because who still goes to a theater? Theater goers to electrodes, and they had them watch James Bond movies. And what happened was when the theater goers or the moviegoers were watching James Bond running down and chasing the criminal or catching the bad guy, that the same parts of their brain that would light up if they were actually James Bond, actually running, actually catching the bad guy, lit up. Our bodies are designed neurologically, psychologically, and emotionally to connect to stories. And so even though we're not experiencing, even though we're not living that life, we can experience those moments vicariously, and that's hugely popular or hugely important. This is another quote that I really love. This is from Paul Zak. A compelling story with an emotional trigger alters our brain chemistry. It makes us more understanding and more open to ideas. It's a really great concept, right? Paul Zak saying this. Let me ask you, what is neuroeconomics? Put it in the chat, everyone. Hannah's monitoring the chat. Hannah, what are people saying? It's neuroeconomics.
We have what you pay attention to, but also black market trade in brains.
Yes.
But maybe it's more like the price of space in your brain is another answer that we're getting.
Okay. All right. Let me tell you what neuroeconomics is, and those are really great guesses. Neuroeconomics is basically a synthetic discipline that combines economics, neuroscience, and psychology. It basically is used to determine how individuals make economic decisions. Point of fact, Dr. Zak has dedicated his personal career to figuring out how stories can be used to maximize profits and sway economies. This makes me think about Ryan's really great finance session yesterday, where he talked about the two most important things that we manage being time and people, right? And wherever there are people, there are going to be stories because stories are the way that we are wired. And I think it's really remarkable to imagine that someone understands the power of story enough that he uses this discipline to consult on how you can actually sway economies and maximize corporate profits. That's insane to me. All right. Now, y'all, we are going to talk about the structure of story, and this is going to be a fun interactive game. This is about to get real because we are playing for tickets. Joy has given me the permission to give tickets out for the first right answer for each of these stories. So, y'all ready? Guess the story. Once upon a time, a war veteran takes a job as a salesperson and rents a small house. One day, he's invited to a party hosted by his next door neighbor. Because of that, they become friends. And because of that, he becomes entwined in the messy relationships of the neighbor's circle of friends and lovers until finally multiple people die meaningless deaths and the war veteran flees to the kinder and gentler Midwest. Hannah.
Lauren Barney got it really quick too.
Lauren Barney, thank you very much. That was The Great Gatsby. All right, let's play another Guess the Story. Once upon a time, a man created a theme park inhabited by android hosts. The androids were programmed with the inability to harm humans, giving the guests the ability to indulge in their wildest fantasies without fear of repercussion. One day, a software update allows an android to access memories that should have been long deleted. Because of that, she awakens to her true nature and the nature of the park itself. Because of that, she undertakes a quest to transform herself until finally a bloody showdown of epic proportions occurs. What's the story?
Audrey got it. Audrey, I want Manny or Maney, I'm not sure, but Audrey,
Audrey
you were
Manning!
so fast.
Awesome. All right, Audrey. Westworld. All right, the last one. Once upon a time, there was a young woman in love. She found out their boyfriend was a player. And because of that, she decided to take reprisal while he was at the bar. And because of that, she reduced his most prized possession to a useless, immobile piece of leather, glass, and steel until finally she satiated her rage, congratulated herself on paying it forward, and resolved to date higher quality men. Guess the story.
And Hope Gilbertson got it.
All right. Carrie Underwood, Before He Cheats. Now, I give you these three examples, one of which is the Great American Novel. One of them is a really highly rated and incredibly expensively produced sci-fi series. One of them is a country music song. And the reason that I illustrate the point this way is because that story from the very beginning follows a very specific pattern. The way that Aristotle outlined it, it was exposition, complication, hold on just a second. What's the third word that is blocked on my screen, Hannah?
Crisis?
Crisis, thank you. Climax and resolution. Y'all, there's this Zoom thing that says your meeting is being recorded, and I can't get rid of it without like exiting the presentation. So I'm doing most of the reading of the slides from memory. So this is the way that Aristotle outlines stories. I like Pixar's version just a little bit better. Once upon a time, one day, because of that, and because of that, until finally. So let's take a look at what that means. So exposition, once upon a time, this is the very beginning. It's where you the setting, the time and place, the characters and backstory, the theme, and one example of that is Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Seven Rings. Meet Will and Katie at the very beginning of the story. Excuse me, I'm speaking here. Thank you, doggies. At the beginning of the story, it's Will and Katie parking cars, taking names, and singing karaoke together, right? That's the way the story starts. And then complication. One day, want plus obstacle equals the conflict. A good example of that, Big dies. Because of that, we go on to crisis. Because of that progression, good and bad, rinse, repeat in this building of tension. Great example of that is Dorothy having a really, really, really bad day, right? All she wants to do is keep her dog safe. Suddenly she's caught in a cyclone. She's swept up in her house, and all of a sudden she finds that she's killed the Wicked Witch of the East. And then all havoc ensues. She meets Glinda. So let's pause for a second because I have a bone to pick with Glinda. I mean, according to the Wizard of Oz, Glinda was supposed to be the good witch, right? But I think that Gregory Maguire in Wicked got it right in that I think Glinda's like the original Mean Girl. Okay, think about it for just a second here. She floats in a bubble, right? Says hello to Dorothy, asks her, "Are you a good witch or a bad witch?" And then she takes the heels from the Wicked Witch of the East and puts them on the feet of a farm girl who has never walked in heels in her life. right? Poor girl has never put on a pair of heels. And then says, oh, I'm sorry, I can't help you. Go find the wizard, and makes her walk in those heels on a brick road by herself. What the actual? Is that what a friend would actually do, right? So I'm just saying, Linda, you are not who you appear to be. So the story continues. Dorothy meets friends. Dorothy almost gets killed in a field of poppies. Then there's the whole flying monkey thing. Oh, first there's the quest, right? The wizard sends them on a quest. There are the flying monkeys. So this is really interesting. MIT did this study on the valence of stories, and they measured what stories were the most interesting to people, stories that started low and crescendoed high in a steady arc, stories that started high and ended low in a steady arc, and stories that did the seesaw back and forth, good, bad, good, and bad, good, or good, bad, bad, right? It will be very surprising to all of you to learn that the stories that resonated most with people were the good, bad, bad. The stories that people liked most seemed to be the ones that ended in tragedy. I'm just going to leave that there for a while. All right, that moves us on to climax, the big crescendo. No crescendo is bigger than Luke Skywalker finding out that Darth Vader is your father. And that leads us to the final part of story, which is the resolution until finally, the realization, transformation, conclusion, and lesson. I'm hoping that many of you have watched Slumdog Millionaire. This was actually a movie that came out in 2008. It's a story about an orphan in India who gets on a game show and he makes it to the final round. And he is asked this question about who is the third of the three musketeers. And he smiles when he's asked this question because you flash back to these areas or these moments in his time where he has the book, The Three Musketeers, with him. And the punchline of the story is that he never opened the book. He never read the story. I'm not going to tell you what happened because I think it's well worth the watching. But that brings us to this idea of pattern in storytelling, the 7 themes that we have in storytelling. Those themes are fate, ambition. Now I am going to have to hold on just a second. Got it. There we go. Now I am going to have to exit and hit play again. Okay, fate, ambition, sacrifice, transformation, the free guy, love, all too well. Right, Hannah? Right? Taylor?
Correct.
I will never forgive Jake. I'm just going to say that right now. I will never forgive him. Vengeance, she-devil, and resurrection, the lion, the witch, and the wardrobe. And then 7 plots. Overcoming the monster, the quest, voyage and return, rags to riches, comedy, tragedy, and rebirth. I would challenge you all to take any story you know and love and see if you can't map this either to the 5 pieces of that story arc or to one or more of the 7 themes and plots. And I think that this is a really exciting thing because a lot of times we as creators want to tell a story that no one has told before. We want to do things that no one else has done. And the wonderful thing about understanding that story has a pattern is that it gives us the boundaries in which to play. It gives us the ability to be more creative because we know what patterns our minds are looking for. And it's amazing to me that stories have lived on with these patterns and with these plots and with these themes throughout space, time, and culture. All right, last thing I want to cover in this section is story in the digital age. I want to show you very quickly some stories. Stories themselves are universal, Frankfurt talks about. The way we tell them changes with technology at hand. Every medium has given rise to a new form of narrative and people want to be immersed. So when we talk about storytelling in 2024, some of the stories we see are along the lines of what University of Washington does. They do these elaborate multimedia immersive stories that have incredible photography. They include video. They include illustrations and infographics that animate. They include stories and these, what I would call micro stories of people, profiles, these individual units of content. They include quotes. They include calls to action at the end. Really involved storytelling that takes months and months and tens of thousands of dollars to produce. And on the other end of the spectrum, we've got stories like this on Instagram. Washington University has this great story of humans of Washington University of St. Louis. In this case, it's a photograph and a caption. In this case, it's a quote. We are in an age of micro stories. We are in an age where we can tell stories in really cool new ways because the form of storytelling has been infused with both technology and really, well, honestly, just technology. So let's take a look at this. 5 elements of digital storytelling: intentional design, structured content, integrated multimedia, engagement, and technology. So when we talk about intentional design, we're talking about interfaces that encourage reading, layout flexibility, touch optimized content interactions, page choreography. So when you go on those websites or you go on apps where you're just delighted by all these really cool things that you see, these little grace notes of design, that is all part of great storytelling. The second element is structured content. This includes tagging and taxonomy, metadata, and hold on just a second. I'm going to take doggy TV. Hello, little ones. Your TV privileges. Their TV privileges have been taken away for the balance of this webinar. So structured content, when I started writing stories, I was in print. So what we would do is we'd create these long form stories and we would have them designed. And once we got them to the printer, we'd be like, oh, this is so good, we're done. And the difference between storytelling then is that when you published a story in print, that was for all intents and purposes the end. You could not take it back. You could not fix a typo. You have published. But in this digital world, the time that you publish, the moment you publish, is the beginning of the life of your story. And rather than having to tell one story in one long narrative, you can now take a quote, you can take an image, you can take a video, you can take 3 or 4 paragraphs, and they can live on their own on Instagram, they can live on TikTok, they can live on your webpage, they can go out in a newsletter. And then you can take all of that and pull it together into a massive story that's even more than the sum of its parts. It's such a cool way to be able to engage in storytelling now. The third element is media: photography, video, audio, illustrations, infographics, and data visualization. Fourth element is engagement opportunities. It's when I worked in alumni magazines, we lived for those handwritten notes that we got from people that said, oh, I really enjoyed that story. But now with engagement opportunities, you can build calls to action like give now into your stories. You can measure how people are interacting. You can gift content. You can create ancillary or more engaged opportunities for people to dive deeper into topics through podcasts and playlists. So content builds upon content. And the final piece of storytelling in this day and age is technology: content management systems, analytics, experimentation capabilities, artificial intelligence tools. Mia, if you are on this call, thank you for your last session on AI and collaboration. That was really awesome. You gave people some great tips on how to use AI, and I really loved your sensibility about how AI allows us to be more efficient, to free up time that we could otherwise be using to do more strategy, to be better at the work that we do, to engage in professional development. I love the sensibility of using AI as a tool to make us better as professionals. So that brings us to this idea of mobilizing story. Now, empathy. This quote from Indy Young means a lot to me. I got the chance to work with Indy Young several years ago on a project for University of Buffalo. And as a result of that project, we designed the journey and experience map product that we do a lot of with the web and that we do some of with creative. And she talks about empathy as the idea of understanding what's going on in a person's head and heart and acknowledging that their reasons and their emotions are valid, even though they differ from their own. Caitlin, if you're on this call, thank you for your session yesterday when you talked about design thinking. And I loved the fact that you started with this idea of empathy, because I think empathy not only is the origination of design thinking, it's also the origination of being able to tell really great stories. And it's also, I would say, at the heart of everything that we do with psychographic segmentation. So what does that mean? It means that you focus on your audiences. This is a checklist that I use every time I produce a piece of content. I ask myself, who am I producing this for? Why is this story important to them? Not important to me, but important to them. What do I want them to understand? What do I want them to do? What's the narrative story? What's the conflict or tension? And what will enhance my audience's understanding of the content? So I try my best when I'm creating content to focus on what the audience's journey is first, and then ask myself, how does what I want to share support or meet that journey? The second set of questions I try to ask myself are questions about sustainability. So how will I share and promote this story? How will I measure the success of the story? What metrics are going to be important? How can I bring the story to life with the resources that I have access to? What related stories, information, or data can I share? And how can I approach the storytelling production so that whatever I do can serve other people? How can it extend the storytelling toolkit that my team has, that our company has? So those are questions that I hope will be useful to you when you think about your own storytelling production. And that brings us to the final piece of this webinar, which is this idea of lessons learned. And these are lessons that I have come upon in the 30 or so years that I have worked in communications for higher education. Some of these are for our client, and some of these I would say are for us. And let's start this section with one final poll. And this recapitulates the keynote that started off the conference yesterday, Back to the Future. So here's my question to you. Who's the hero in Back to the Future? And I will have a show of hands. There are no tickets involved in this, sorry. So how many people feel like Marty McFly is the hero of the story? All right. How many people feel that George, the father, is the hero of the story? Oh, Lorraine's getting zero love right now in this poll. How many people think that Lorraine is the hero? And how many people think that Doc is the hero? All right, answers are coming in. We're going to let this roll for just a little longer.
It's slowing down a bit, so give me a couple more seconds.
All right, thanks, Hannah.
All right, I'm going to end it. Can you see the results, or do you want me to read them out?
Oh, I can see them, but your voice is better than mine. You go.
All right, so we have Marty with 37%, George with 11%, Lorraine with 9%, and Doc coming in with the lead at 43%. Oh, I could
All
share
right,
these.
awesome. Thank you all very much. You know who never gets voted as the hero of Back to the Future? Anyone? Anyone? Their high school. So that is the first lesson learned for our clients. Our client's institution is not the hero of their story. And this is a really hard lesson for most institutions to learn because they want to talk about all the great things that the institution does. But the fact of the matter is that the heroes of the story for our institution, they're the people, they're the students, the faculty members, the alumni who go out and do incredible things as a result of what the institution has made possible in their lives. So the institution's role is not the role of the hero. The institution's role is the role of the supporter, the guide. They're the Obi-Wan or the Yoda, the Luke Skywalker, who is the hero of the story. All right, the second lesson. Oh, this is a great quote from Andrew Stanton from Toy Story. The greatest commandment is make me care. And I would wager that people tend to care far more about other people than they do about institutions. The second lesson of the story, or of storytelling, is no conflict, no story. If you have of a list of facts. It's a great list of facts. If you have someone who's saying, oh my gosh, this was amazing, this was great, I can now go out and do really wonderful things in the world, that's not a story, right? A story is when someone has to overcome something. A story is when someone comes to a point of realization because of some sort of conflict or tension in their lives. And I would say that what makes a story engaging is watching someone live through, work through that tension. Conflict, according to Bill Strathman, is a story's oxygen. The third lesson is fewer stories, better told. We like to generate story after story after story, and our institutions, our clients feel the need to get on this hamster wheel and just endlessly produce content. And the fact of the matter is that many times we are better served by focusing on fewer efforts and bringing those stories to more real life. I love Anne Handley's quote here. What matters is telling a true story well. The fourth lesson is story first, department second. I hear this a lot with institutions where they say, we really can't engage in storytelling. We just don't have the staff. And what they mean is we don't have the staff on our team. But most institutions have writers, they have photographers, they have videographers. And part of the work that we get to do with them is help them to break the silos down between the departments in an institution and help them to learn how to tell those stories as a team, as a group. Two really great quotes to share here. Rockefeller Foundation did a study on digital storytelling for social impact. And what they found was time and time again, the most effective organizations had a storytelling approach because they were on the same page on how to tell a story. This was also a really great quote. This was from the New York Times. They did this expose probably about 8 years ago now that peeled back the veneer of one of the top storytelling and news organizations in the world. And they talked about the fact that there was this huge rift between the journalism side and the marketing side. And they talked about the skepticism that stemmed from speaking slightly different languages. People are referring to the same thing when one side says content or brand and the other side says journalism. And we see that a lot, time and time again, with our clients. And that brings us to the last lesson, and that is, this is from me. And this is not only for the clients that we serve, but for us as a company, as we continue to collaborate better and approach our work with more of an interdisciplinary spirit. Really, the best stories that we tell are the ones that we to tell together. Thank you. We have a few minutes for any questions or comments that people have.
So far, just a lot of happy emojis and exclamation points in the comments.
Awesome. We'll leave it open for a few more seconds, and otherwise. All right, then I will
I think
turn.
we're gonna hand this back over to Steph then, I believe.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Volt, so much for that wonderful presentation. What a great way to close out an amazing 2 days. So we have come to the end of the Carnegie Inside Out Conference. And to close us out, I am going to start playing Penny Lane, and I'm going to unmute you on random so we can all sing along together. Just kidding. I won't do that. Although I am very excited that you all enjoyed the music so much. And I will be incorporating music into every meeting that I'm now a part of. But I want to take this opportunity to sincerely thank all of you for your participation, your engagement over these last 2 days. This conference has truly been a testament to the power of collaboration, innovation, and inspiration. Your active engagement has been so amazing. The Zoom chats have by far been my favorite part of just seeing everyone's reaction. Your insightful questions, your contributions, have made this conference so amazing. So thank you to all of you for participating, to all of our hosts, to all of our presenters for truly inspiring me and making me so proud to get to work alongside of you each and every day. I want to leave you with this challenge. When we come back to work on Monday, let's carry this energy. Let's carry this actual power of human connection that we have created, that I hope you're all feeling right now. Let's carry the connections you've made, the conversations that have been sparked, and the support we've shown each other. Let's carry that into our work and our conversations in some way each and every day. So thank you so much once again for your attendance at Carnegie Inside Out, and have a great weekend. Bye, everyone.